Over the past few weeks, both Jim Taggart and Sam Henderson have met with their respective mentors, who lined up a series of experts to help them on their journey. Industry legend Barry Lambert spoke at length with Sam Henderson about clearly understanding the changes in FOFA, defining his market, scaling his advice through franchise or equity buy-in, and of course, using his media profile in the self-managed super fund space to his advantage.
Self-managed super funds is, in my view, the vehicle of the future. So you're on the right track there. So I've actually seen you on TV, and you're a great presenter. So I think that could well be a very important feature of your business going forward.
Meanwhile, CEO and entrepreneur Robbie Bennetts has been mentoring Jim Taggart on working through maximising his earnout ahead of the drop-dead sale day to Austbrokers.
You've got the situation with an earnout. The last thing you want is a whole heap of those staff suddenly leaving.
With Judgment Day looming, both industry giants will today come together to discuss their plans and hold a joint mentoring session to determine their progress.
Well, Barry, how's Sam? I haven't met him or anything. I'm just wondering what he's like.
He got into this business about 2004, bought some fees in Melbourne and Sydney. He's now consolidating that. He's got a fair media profile, and as a result of that, he's looking to build a Sydney-based business, specialising in financial advice, obviously, but specialising within self-managed super funds. So that's sort of the primary focus of his business.
What have the experts been saying to him about self-managed super?
The experts have been talking about structures and those sorts of things, and compliance and governance. And of course, Christina Clance is telling about the need for more responsible managers and the risk involved in being a licensee, which we all know about.
Yeah, absolutely.
What I'd like you to consider is if you're seeking to expand the business, whether it be franchising or even internal with your advisors, that dynamic changes in terms of your corporate governance structure and in terms of what your responsibility is, and you may have to actually consider putting on other responsible managers onto your licence as you expand.
And then, of course, other advice on structures, whether or not he should do the franchising or be a company and so on.
You've got opportunities because of your profile and attraction to the younger client to build something scalable. But building scale in the SMSF area, if that's where you choose to focus, I think will be challenging. The higher net worth client that you want to serve, the less it's scalable.
So I think the thing he needs to make sure he understands, of course, is that whilst these advisors have best interest involved, he's the one who's got to make the decision that best suits what he wants. So hopefully he understands that, otherwise the poor bugger will be confused. He's got a lot of potential, but he's got to sort out the basics first. Hello, Sam. Have you met Robbie?
I haven't.
Robbie Bennetts?
Hey, Robbie.
Sam, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Sam's my man in this competition.
Yeah?
He's been talking to the experts. Tell us a bit about what you've come across, Sam.
Well, it's been an interesting chat so far.
And where you're up to with the decision-making, more importantly, I guess.
Yeah, well, that's the interesting part about it. But I suppose that the whole idea of having the experts was to challenge me on a few issues. And one of the questions Steve asked me, and Matthew sort of reiterated as well, was around understanding what our USP is. I mean, financial advisors all look the same, really, when you break down the businesses. So the one thing that I've sort of come up with is looking at it from a client's perspective. What they want is independence. And there's only about 14 to 16 independent advisors around Australia, and I think given the fact that we're only inches away from being independent under the Corporations Act definition, so far I think that's probably our best angle and most supportive angle in growing the business.
Can I play devil's advocate there? You talk about independence and clients are looking for it. Is it you saying that independence is good, or is it the client? Because you'd have certain people from certain institutions suggesting that going with a bank advisor is good because of the security.
Yeah, absolutely. It goes both ways. There's no doubt people are looking for all sorts of different things, but in our market, I think the self-managed super fund market is the area that we've chosen to work with. A lot of people in there are looking for independence. They've been frustrated with wrap platforms, frustrated with managed funds that haven't been performing. They've obviously lost money in the GFC and they're pointing the finger. So independence to a lot of our clients is actually we think is an important aspect.
So I believe you had some discussions also around structuring. Have you had any thoughts on that? You confirmed your position, or what?
Yeah, I've had plenty of thoughts around it. You were suggesting that we may have a franchisable model. I'm not quite sure whether we do or not. It's still something that I think will eventuate over time. But I think there is potential to perhaps either franchise or even grow out a company model by either buying into accounting firms or just growing financial planning firms under the guise of being independent.
Sam, have the experts given you good advice as far as the franchise modelling Have they explained that clearly to you?
One thing I don't like about it, of course, is the amount of risk involved in monitoring so many different businesses. So it's probably something I'd ask you guys is, what's involved in those sorts of risks? You got accountants and financial advisors out there recommending all sorts of different products, some of which have gone south.
Well, I've had a franchise business, so I know a little bit about it. I wouldn't be too concerned about the risks. The benefit of franchise as opposed to the corporate model is with the corporate model you've got to manage all those people. With the franchising, of course, you're broken up into smaller parts and they manage the manpower side of that business and so on. But you're still going to be liable underneath the model. So I wouldn't rule out franchising because of the risk.
Right.
Because under the licensing, you're going to bear the risk. And in fact, from my experience, unless you're a great manager of people, franchising just makes it a lot easier. There's risk in all sorts of businesses, so I wouldn't be too worried about that. You've got to work out what fits best with you.
The biggest issue I think that we have is how we gain that scalability and how you gain it reasonably quickly. You guys have already done it, you've been down the path. What would your advice be to someone that's got a business of, $2 or $3 million turnover and growing? You've only got so much capacity, you've only got so much finite resources.
Well, nothing's easy. Nothing's easy in business, let me tell you. But the lucky thing I had at Count, and you've got to work on what your USP is, that we were the first ones, and virtually the only ones, into the accounting-based field. So we were lucky. And so we just exploited that. So you've got to find something that's different.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think perhaps the biggest issue in that transition is once you stop earning the direct client dollars yourself, it's making sure you have the funding for that growth, because that can be quite expensive. But there's a very simple rule there. You make sure your growth is kept within your cash flow. Where most people come undone is they start borrowing and then they convince themselves to look at the expenditure budget and say, I'm still within budget, without being accountable to their own income budget. And that's where a lot of people fail to make that transition from running a very successful boutique operation to moving into a more corporate world. So I think that's a very, very dangerous time when you go through that transition.
Gents, one thing I did want to talk to you about was the prospect of scaled advice. We are getting a lot of inquiries through the books that I've written and some of the media things that I've done. And our business has really been set up for looking after retirees in the self-managed super fund space. But now we're getting a lot of inquiries from young people who are looking to educate themselves on anything from budgeting, buying property for the first time, shares, and more of the traditional financial planning market, which is kind of where we started out anyway. What my question is to you guys is how do you accommodate this scaled advice?
Well, I think it's a very interesting thing, because the financial planning industry really made itself too complicated. And that was, I think, to justify the inefficiencies in the industry, the fees they wanted to charge and needed to charge to stay in business because of their lifestyle and everything else. So as a result, the financial planning industry is a very expensive industry. Then on top of that, you've got all this regulation. It makes it very expensive to give very comprehensive advice, etc. Scaled advice, of course, if you can do it well and have sufficient clients, then you have the ability to perhaps make some money out of that business. But there's no reason why an advisor with a larger organisation where they have sufficient clients, they can't also have an independent scaled advice.
Maybe as a specialisation area, we skip that altogether. We don't go down the scaled advice path. Would you agree or disagree? Still see it as an
Well, I understand where you're coming from, and your primary business will be advice, tailored individual advice. However, if in fact you're generating a lot of leads from your marketing, etc., the question is, do you let them go to waste, you might say. So that's where I was coming from, that maybe you can do something in that market.
With your media profile, people will come to you saying that we saw you on the TV and we need some advice in this area. How you get that balance right, that's an issue, or it's a challenge for you.
No, that's really good advice. Thanks, gents. It's like sitting with a couple of sages. It's fantastic. Thanks so much for your advice.
Pleasure.
Well, Robbie, what do you think of my man?
Well, Barry, I'm very impressed with your man. It's interesting when you're dealing with somebody a little younger and you know that they've got plenty of energy, ambition. He's going to come up against a couple of challenges because he does have a profile, and I can only see that growing. You know, people are going to have expectations, and I don't know if his business is actually structured yet to be able to deliver.
That's right, because unless he provides that advice at the lower level, the scaled advice,
yes,
He's going to have a lot of people contacting him, and he's going to say, no, I'm sorry, you don't fit our requirements.
Well, that'd be bad for him, because suddenly you've got people saying he's too arrogant to talk to me, and that's not what he's about.
Right.
So he's going to have to address that issue behind the scenes.
So I think he's, whilst he wasn't too keen on that scaled advice at one stage, I think he's prepared to have a look at that. So
Yeah.
he needs to think about that.
To be honest, a scaled offering is a scary prospect, because it means that we're going to be much larger than what we are at the moment, and it's one of those things that probably needs to evolve over time. We need to sit down with some consultants and some experts in the area. So I look forward to going through that, and I certainly haven't decided, and I won't decide until I've had time to analyse that and make sure it's the right thing for Henderson Maxwell.
In a matter of months, Jim Taggart will leave a life he's been living for over 3 decades. He sold the Taggart Group to Austbrokers and is tracking well to maximise his earnout. But the departure of a few staff members may have thrown a spanner in the works.
Do you think that the departures pose any risk on the client retention, revenue retention side?
It is my view, and since you've asked me the question, I can only express it from my perspective. I think the clients will still stay with Taggart Austbrokers.
Today, it's Jim's turn to meet the mentors for a final session before Judgment Day.
Tell me about Jim.
Yeah, Jim's a high-profile person as well, and it's interesting watching how Jim and the experts are handling each other. Jim obviously has been used by many people to perhaps suggest or advise various industry folk, and suddenly he's got experts talking to him.
You've been in the business of doing plans for everybody else forever, and I'm just throwing it to you that you need to do one for yourself. Put some time aside to think about what you want to do.
I don't think Jim is absolutely ready to leave the industry at this time, and I think he's a valuable asset for the industry. So I'd like to think that they can work through that, and that gives him a good, clear direction, but he can stay there and contribute to the business, not just through his earnout, but he can contribute on an ongoing basis.
Jim's a bit like you and me, I guess. He's been there and done that, so he'll be very focused on that earnout and making sure that he hands over a good business to the new owners, because he wants to do a good job.
Definitely.
And wants to do the right thing by the new owners. He's that sort of a person, what I know of Jim.
Well, good to see you again, Jim. Obviously, you've met Barry before. You know Barry.
There you go, Jim. Good to see you again, mate.
Good to see you.
Yes. So, Jim, how's it all been?
Well, since we last met, hectic. I've got to thank you for the people you allowed me to go and see. They did something that I don't like. They made me really think. They challenged me about what I need to think about going forward in my own life, and some really deep and thoughtful questions about the business and maintaining and keeping it on course.
Well, that's good, Jim. What did you take out of some of those conversations? Did you feel as if you could take some of the knowledge and use it?
As most people know, I have sold the business, and there is an earn-out of a particular amount, and in terms of revenue, a rise and fall, I mean, that's fairly well known. The interesting thing for me, it's not just a daily grind, but you need a strategic plan on a daily, weekly, monthly and yearly. You need to make sure that that all comes together, not just in an ad hoc way.
Tell us a bit more about what the experts told you, but have you got a clear path? Were they confused you? Or what?
No. For me, and I was very fortunate to meet Anne Fuchs, she really challenged my thinking in terms of saying, you really need to come to grips with what's happening every moment of the time, because of course the winds can change at a drop of a hat. So that was a good takeout for me.
So did you take that discussion with her and think about the future and what Jim Taggart was going to do personally?
Since we last met, so many other opportunities have come to me, particularly in terms of charity and community work, and people know my involvement and love for that. Opportunity sometimes finds you, even when you're not looking for it. Notre Dame University has just made me an adjunct professor, which I'm really delighted with personally. I value education and training, and for them to believe that I hold the values and a leadership role for the university is overwhelming. So I'm chuffed.
Yeah, congratulations, fantastic.
Thank you.
Well done.
For many years, for those who know me, I've been very involved with the Salvation Army, and only 2 weeks ago they've asked me to take on the role of appeals chairman for Western Sydney. We have to raise $5 million, which is a pretty big task, and I'm really chuffed that they feel that I can help, as we say in our church, brothers and sisters and our less fortunate people.
So, Jim, Judgment Day is going to loom up there quickly. So what sort of lessons have you learnt that you can share with myself and Barry now from the experts that you've been talking to?
Robbie, that's a great question. The lessons that I've learnt is so many, and the first and foremost is be committed to the contractual and personal obligations of fulfilling my role for the next period of time to the 2nd of July. I can't stress that enough. People have asked me, will I help develop young advisors? I've said I'm not sure yet. People have asked me, will I go and teach at the university full time? Not sure yet. So, yeah.
Yeah, with some of the advice that you've been delivered, and I also understand that a couple of staff members have departed.
That's correct.
How is that affecting the business, or affecting you, or affecting your earnout, or the culture? And you've developed a great culture in your business over the years. How is that all being affected by that at the moment?
People do things for a whole range of different reasons. Some will tell you the truth, some will slide around it, someone will leave you in the air. My interpretation, let's say with the staff leaving, is an honest one. In my humble opinion, for exclusive reasons in the sense that they are not related. That's my own interpretation. I hope I'm not naive. And I asked them, particularly after they gave their notice. They could have said, we're leaving because we don't like you, Jim, or we're leaving because you're leaving. But opportunities come. Now, they didn't tell me the full details. It could be more money, it could be a whole range of things.
They're entitled to leave, as you know, Jim, and I'm sure, and that's why you've sold the business. The business is much bigger than an individual employee, and so I wouldn't worry too much about that. People make all sorts of decisions in their life, and you can't be responsible for that. If you've done the right thing by them and so on, yes, as you said, some people are trying to attack that business, that perceived weakness, and some people might find that, well, it's greener on the other side of the fence. It's often browner on the other side of the fence, by the way, but that's for them to find out, perhaps. But don't worry about that. Just keep on doing what you're doing. From what I know, you're well on track.
Barry, what else can we talk to Jim about for Judgment Day? Do you think he's in reasonable shape?
I think he's in great shape. He's got a great business. He's a very honest, passionate man, as you know and can tell. He wants to do the right thing, and there's nothing wrong with wanting to do the right thing. He'll execute that. He shouldn't be too worried about a couple of little things that might happen. Well, Jim, for Judgment Day, I'd like to wish you well.
Thank you, Barry.
My man, Super Sam, is going to be hard to beat, let me tell you. But I think Big Jim's going to be one hell of a competition for him.
Jim's got big shoulders, Barry. Just have a look at him. He's a big man.
It's going to be close.
They're both good.
Humbly, I don't mind being beaten by a better person, but I'd say I'd come second.
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure you'll come second, mate. You might well come first.
Jim,
good luck.
All the very best, mate.
Thank you so much.
Congratulations on everything so far.
All the best.
Well, Barry, we've met Sam this morning. Now you've met my charger, Jim. What do you think?
Jim's a lovely person. He's very genuine. The buyer of that business is very lucky. They've got someone as genuine as Jim. He's very committed to doing the right thing, and he understands, I think, what his role is. And of course, he's preparing himself for activities beyond the eventual sale and perhaps the ending of some of his working activity. So, you know, I don't think he's got too many problems at all.
Do you think he's prepared himself pretty well for the Judgment Day?
Oh, I think so. He's done, everything's right. I would suggest he might have been a bit slow early on for what you thought, but in terms of his looking towards his retirement, but he seems to address those issues to me.
I actually think we've been fortunate to get to work with a couple of very experienced and very professional gentlemen this time in this particular go, isn't it? It's just been fantastic.
I don't know how the judges work, but certainly Big Jim will be hard to beat.
The takeout for me is to really home in on those 3 or 4 key areas and really get some solutions further about making sure I'm on track, the team's on track, Michael's on track, and Austbrokers is on track. What I hear from Barry and from Robbie is that you need to be doing that continuously, and you need to do that with some accuracy and some acuteness in focus. So that's a really good takeout.
That's it for this season of No More Practice. But tune in for details of Judgment Day at nomorepractice.com.au. You won't want to miss when Jim reveals his final earnout.
Judgment Day is not too far away, where all the experiences we had come to that one moment. There's no doubt in my mind that the experiences and the advice that I've got along the way will certainly set me up, and I think fulfil those KPIs and those commercial, contractual arrangements of the earnout.
And Sam reveals his ultimate business strategy.
I'm not willing to give up the engagement between myself and my family for the growth of a business. But by the same token, I want to make sure that I can provide good, scalable advice to people. And finding that balance, that's going to be my challenge.